There's no music if you have no body to play it with, so take care of your body first.
You getting into the gym and you lifting weights and working on muscles it's physical therapy for the benefit of your playing.
The truth is, nothing works like just taking care of the simple stuff: diet, exercise, and sleep. Take care of that and you'll be fine.
Join us as two musicians and fitness coaches discuss strength, wellness, and fitness in relation to musicians, artists, and performance.
Hey there, welcome back to the Tuned and Strong podcast. This is Angela McHouston of Music Strong.
And this is Dr. Jen Cabasmay of Tuned and Toned Performance. And today we're joined by a special guest, Dr. Jackie Dove. Jackie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to those of you who are not familiar in our audience with who you are, could you please just tell us a little about yourself, who you are, etc.?
So Jackie Dove, and I'm a professor of anatomy physiology at McLennan Community College, and I'm an adjunct professor at Baylor, so I teach over there too. I've been teaching since 2002, like some form of physiology. So my educational background, I have a BA in psychology and a minor in anthropology. So I kind of have like an evolutionary foundation in how I approach things. And then I have my master's in ex-phys, and I did my clinical work in inpatient cardiopulmonary. And after that, I went on to get my PhD at Baylor in exercise nutrition, preventive health. And then I did my postdoc in psychology and neuroscience at the Mind Body Medicine Research Lab at Baylor, where I delivered a hypnosis intervention for hot flashes in postmenopausal females. Also, I've been to India. I went to school there too, and trained in teaching Hatha yoga. So I trained there. I started meditating about 20 years ago. So I've always been really, really interested in like this intersection of like psychology and the mind, and then, exercise and nutrition, I feel like is just, how we kind of stay sustained. I started playing music whenever I was in 6th grade, and I just kind of thought, I'll go on to college and play, but my band director left, and so I wasn't able to pursue that. And so I stopped. I tried to be a music minor for like a year, and my anxiety couldn't handle it. And I think that's kind of coming into our topic today. Of my interest in the area has just really been based on a lot of my experiences. Most of my education was kind of so I could understand myself better, and then just me being a nerd about things and having this hyper focus and wanting to talk about my special interest. It's just a nice side effect where I get to talk about A&P. But I really started with me trying to figure out what is going on with me, and I had to walk away from music because it was too hard, and I didn't understand what was happening. And then after I go on this big journey, I ended up getting a full-time job where there's a community band, and it's like a Friday fun band. We kind of talk about it's like a community concert band here on campus, and I was able to get back into playing music because I know how important playing music is for our brain and our cognitive reserve. And I just needed to be in a safe, secure place where I could start playing again. And now I play in the Waco Community Band, and I was fortunate to get to play in our McLennan Community Orchestra for a little bit. And so all of this is coming together for me, like with protecting musicians, like what you're doing, like physically is so important, but then also the cognitive part. And understanding that we have a lot of neurodiversity in musicians, and sometimes some of the communication differences, we intersect with our teachers and students. And when you are diverse, and kind of throw some terminology there, it started out in the 1990s. Judy Singer, she's Australian, she came up with that term, and it was really more with the autism community. but it's expanded, and we can look at other neurodevelopmental differences. And sometimes it's hard to communicate with someone who's neurotypical when you are neurodiverse, and those things can get in the way with music instruction as a student, between teachers. And so I think that for me, I just want to figure out what can we do to just make it to where we just can continue playing and recognizing, that there may need to be some accommodations, that can support that student.
So when you say neurotypical and neurodivergent, what is that? What does that terminology mean?
I think that when she first brought it up, it was really more of like a social movement, where we have like advocacy and inclusion, and recognizing that some like neurological patterns, right? The way we think about things. There's neurodiversity is everybody. Everyone's different, in how we process information, but there's some processing that may be outside of like our norm, and when it's outside of that norm, then those differences can make it where you're not able to communicate together, and so that inclusion is kind of lost. And so in the autism community, that had been recognized earlier, and so now I think the focus is more on looking at the physiology behind that too, and then recognizing that there's other conditions where that affects a person. Is that clear? Okay. I'm sorry.
Kind of.
I'm inferring what you mean, but I'm not convinced that I really understand.
Okay, so Harvard.
Likewise.
So again, Harvard's website, they kind of defined it as that is differences in neurological and developmental conditions. So I'll give you an example. So for me, there are things that someone who's neurotypical, you just do because it's like the norm, like in communication. Okay, but someone who's neurodivergent, because we may not communicate the same, okay, we miss some of those cues. And so for example, I think one of the first times I kind of realized, like, wait, I'm not like hearing things the same as other people. Like we're driving in the mountains, and there's like this sign that's like, it's a bee alert, with a BEE, so like a bee. And, that's cute. And that's a cute way to communicate to people. Oh, be careful and stuff. But like my first impulse was like, I was jarred, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like looking for bees, and I'm just like, so there's this tendency to like take things real literal, very literal. And then it takes a little bit of more time to be like, oh, wait, that's not what that means. We're not in danger. So there's like, this tendency to just be very literal and also to need things said in like a stepwise, clear communication pattern, maybe more so than someone who's neurotypical. It takes a little extra work. And instruction, where I realized it hit me, I was in Colorado at ski school. And I was so excited, we got to go to ski school. And the instruction was like, okay, hey, take your feet and do them like this, and take your feet and do them like this, and after we go through this hour or whatever, I realized like everybody got to go get on the ski lift except for me. And I was sitting there, I was like, and they were going to the bunny slope, and I didn't get to go. And this is like, a few years ago. And I was like, what's going on? And I was like, and he's like, we're going to work a little more, And then like all of a sudden I'm like going down this hill, and I'm about to like slam into him. So I made myself crash because I didn't know how to stop. And so later on, I'm talking to one of my friends, and he's like, well, he didn't tell you how to stop. I was like, no, it's like the only thing he did. He's like, do your feet like this, do your feet like this, do your feet like this. And he was like, oh, well, that's how you stop. I was like, oh, he never said the words. This is how you stop.
That's kind of interesting.
That's what I mean by neurodiversity. See, like everyone else in that group could do it. But I didn't know what he was talking about because he never said the words. This is how you stop. This is how you turn. You know, I need things over explained, perhaps. Does that help?
Oh, yeah.
I'm less nervous now.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. So like in music, it gets in the way sometimes because I need extra attention on this is why we do things, not, hey, do this. And then being a scientist makes it worse.
I think it would make it better. It's extra like cut and dry, but no.
No, because I feel like my band director told me the other day, he's like, I was asking about the hertz and what do we mean by overtones and what is exactly happening with the air angles, and it's like you're overthinking. I was like, scientist as a musician. I mean, this is hard. So it's like I'll get to a point and it's like, well, you can't just tell me, oh, do this and we're gonna, you know, then this is gonna help you with this. It's like, well, no, I need to know why. What do you mean? But there's different scales, and next thing you know, I'm having to go in and I'm gonna have to research all the different scales and all the flutes, and why would I have different variations in tones, and why would I have to like, you know, tune up, you know, lower the pitch on this note and raise it on another one versus, I mean, I have to know everything. It's not enough to tell me, oh, you know, the airstream needs to come up warm. And I'm like, well, of course the air is going to be warmer when it comes from the deeper parts of your respiratory system. It's like I think that there's maybe for some of us, there's the inability to put the picture together. So I need as much data as possible. Whereas when I'm working, you know, in my professional musician friends, I'm like, it's so intuitive to you. You don't have to know all the things. But for me, I'm like, I need to know all the things.
I don't think you're alone though.
No,
Oh,
actually,
that.
I have a student who's not that bad, by the way, but we definitely had to like, okay, I'm going to give you this much and tell you why. But if I don't say why, oh, there's an issue.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm not going to do that, because why would I do? Oh, you need me to tell you. Okay, I can do that. I need to know that I need to. You know? But a lot of students don't care. Oh, okay, do that. Okay, it's efficiency. But there are definitely students I've run into. I'm like, okay, I need to explain to you what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it works that way, and whether or not I'm being literal. You know?
And some of the symptoms, you know, with people who are a little more neurodiverse, you know, might be increased anxiety and increased depression and some of these other things. And one of the issues with anxiety is anxiety's increased when you can't predict an outcome. And so if you have more data, it gives more empowerment to predict. And I think that's where, for me, like the needs come in, but it also gets in the way because one of the things for me, like pattern recognition and needing everything to be very predictable. And that's why I'm the one that's like, when in doubt, play scales. I could just play scales all day long and just, you know, I just love it because you can just predict. So for me, you know, if I would miss a note, for example, it was just freaking the end of the world. And, you know, Galloway had a quote. It's like, oh, you missed a note. How interesting. You know, the recovery is harder because it's not just that I missed a note. The pattern screwed up. And that, that's like, so it's very destabilizing. So it's because the patterns and being able to predict becomes like a comfort zone, almost like a weighted blanket, you know, for me. So it's like there's so much more involved than just, oh, missing a note, musicality is messed up. And, you know, I can't just recover and keep going, which is what you need to do. Just get over it, you know. But that takes more work, maybe. That
is so incredibly helpful because I'm thinking about all these students that I have taught over the years, but I would just get frustrated. I'm like, it's a wrong note. It doesn't matter. In fact, that's a good thing because now we can find out blah, 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 blah. And they were just hyper fixated on the no. And I haven't thought of it the way that you just said it. The fact that the pattern, it destabilized everything because you're more of a big picture and a pattern than I'm just like, oh, it's a wrong note. It's in the scheme of things, big deal. But that makes so much more sense. And I think that any teachers that are listening, that can be extra helpful in understanding, like if you have students like this, understanding that suddenly things feel like you're walking on marbles and then there's all of this out here. It's not exactly the same as it was. And now we have a lot more work to do. It's not just a wrong note. That's
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah. And then even like it helps me to know what's important to my teacher. So, for example, I'm doing an etude, and I told her this past week, I'm like, oh, it helps me if I know what the purpose and the goal of the etude is. What are we working on here? Because I was taking a lesson and I messed up my articulations, and I was, and I'm feeling myself getting destabilized. So I'm having to work with, just relax. But then I was even like sweating by the end of it, which I obviously did not do a good job relaxing on. And she, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I missed the articulations, and she's like, oh, don't worry, I'm not worried about that. And I was like, oh, well, like if I know that, that helps me not freak out when I miss that. What is important to you as the teacher? So again, that kind of comes into the clear communication. Maybe more so than another student, to let us clearly know, okay, I want to hear evenness. I want to hear a full sound. If you miss a note, I'm not listening for that. That helps me.
Yeah, and this actually kind of ties into what we were talking about with Lee Pearson a few episodes ago. She was talking about communication between teachers and students and how important that is. Because you don't know what the student is experiencing or feeling. Like you can't really help them if you don't know what they're looking for, what they need, what they feel, what they think. It's really a two-way street, and you're talking about that too. So I think that's awesome. Now I don't know if this is kind of an out there question. It's something that as an instructor I'm thinking about, so I'm going to ask it and you can tell me, like, I'm guessing that there's varying levels with what you're talking about, varying types, varying degrees. So there's students who are going to have diagnoses and students who are not. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and in the autistic community, self-diagnosis is recognized. Whether or not it's recognized in the medical community or not, in the autistic community, it is. And notice that I am using identity first language. And that's another difference. Advocacy groups tend to use like a first person language. So like a person with neurodiversity, I'll just say that. Whereas the groups themselves, especially in the autistic community, and there's variability, and in the blind community, the deaf community, they use identity first language. I mean, it's part of the identity. So once a person gets to the point that they're like, hey, you know what, this is my experience and this is what's happening, that is recognized in the autistic community, because it's so hard to get a diagnosis, especially for females, because it's based on males. And in my age group, they didn't diagnose this stuff. I was having symptoms, age 4 with a hyperactive nervous system. I had going back, it is a spectrum, yes. So that's why we just communicate with each person, because there's so much difference within these groups. In my age group, that wasn't diagnosed back then. It wasn't recognized at all. And some of my symptoms I have a hypersensitive nervous system. I have tissue damage even from it. I have pain disorders. I have 2 pain disorders. So whether or not, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, some of my more diverse communication styles and needs may have come from the pain disorders, or we don't know what came first. So everyone will be different, but I will ask, when students are overwhelmed, my own experience is, sometimes it's like if I'm trying to maintain and I'm anxious, if you don't practice enough and you show up for your lesson, you're anxious, and then that makes things worse. If it's noticed that I'm anxious and somebody's like, oh, are you okay? It's almost like I was until you ask, and it triggers me into just going straight on into, and when I played music when I was young, I would cry. That's the first part. And then I would hyperventilate. I've missed opportunities with collegiate professors as a 6th grader because I was hyperventilating and all they could do was pat my back. you know. But then I would like break out in hives. I would throw up. I'd break out in hives. I'd shake uncontrollably, and then eventually I got to where I have tissue damage throughout my whole body from my nervous system just freaking out so much. So it's not good to push. You just don't know how far their body's going to take it. And if they're overwhelmed in lessons, it's like, hey, it's okay. Let's get some water. Let's do something different. What do you need first?
There. And that goes back to what Lee was saying, is ask questions, because teachers just don't ask enough questions sometimes.
Yeah.
And also, don't take it personal. I mean, I'm a college professor, so I understand. Like, there's this demand and rigor that I expect from my students, but then there's acknowledgments like, hey, what do you want to do? Not everybody's going to be a professional musician. Playing music is so good for us. It's like if the only thing that student wants to do for weeks on end is just play scales, maybe that's what their brain needs to just kind of settle back into the patterns, and when they get ready they'll be able to move forward. But you can't always push them at what we might want, you know. Their progress may just look different. Just continuing to play music is progress, you know. But and then the other bad part about it, like I don't even know what my needs are even day to day sometimes. And like what you're saying, you don't know what their students are bringing in, and if there's something else that kind of triggers and makes things hard, then that's going to affect their lessons. And for me, I mean, I feel like it was sad. I mean, it was sad that I stopped playing, and I'm thankful I came back. But I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown if I would have continued playing music. That is where I was, and I didn't have to go that far.
Yeah. And I mean, what you're talking about too is something that I see in certain colleagues, not all of them certainly, but certain colleagues who it doesn't seem to matter which student is in front of them. They're going to push them into, you know, the competitive side of things, like, oh, well, you're going to try, because it reflects nicely on the, you know, teacher. If, oh, well, all of my students are, you know, made regional band and all of them made state, and, you know, but at a certain point, I mean, especially with what you're talking about, that's music as an outlet, as a healthy outlet. Okay, well, if that's the purpose of it, then that's going to be a completely different approach as a teacher. It should be.
So thankful. I've had wonderful teachers, and I want to throw that out there. Most of my pressure is internal. I don't have to be pushed. You don't have to push me as a teacher. I am internally motivated, so I would bring the stress in. I'm the student that the teacher's like, it's okay, calm down, you're doing good, you know. But one thing I would love to see changed in the narrative, right, is recognizing, number one, musicians are small muscle athletes. And this goes to the great work that Angela's doing. We're small muscle athletes, and so injury prevention is huge, okay? But then recognizing, okay, we're small muscle athletes, but then, you know, the work in the brain is just important for our health as exercise is for the body. There's a website I saw in Europe, and I can't remember which one. It was a neuromedicine, I think, and it was said, you know, from cradle to cognitive reserve. That is where the way we need to approach music is to build brain structures and connectivity. So music is to the brain, like exercise is to the body. And every person that goes into exercise, they're not going to be a college athlete, or they're not going to be a professional athlete. It's just good that you exercise. Walking is good. And that's why I need approach music. It's just good to play. And I'm so thankful that I was not pushed into competition, because I would not be able to handle that. I had enough competitiveness with myself, you know, and I am very competitive. Academically, I can handle all that competition. I'd be the smartest, you know, I'm going to try to do the best on the test in the whole room. But like with music, it destroys me. It affects me in a different way. And so some students, they're not going to tolerate being pushed that way. And instead it's like, hey, we're just playing. That's great. And I'm thankful when I started playing music again with Cara Daly. she's like, I just want you to play, just play, you know, and that's what I needed.
Yeah.
So I have some thoughts. We're gonna go all the way back to the beginning when you were talking about we're talking about diversity here. I mean, your degrees are
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm such a nerd. I joke I'm a professional nerd. Like I'm obsessed with learning. Obsessed.
That's wonderful. But what I love is that your interests are so diverse. I mean, A&P and then psychology, which go together, anatomy, physiology, go with psychology because my gosh, there's so much, you know, the brain is part of the body.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget about those things. And then on the other side, as a trainer, my gosh, half of my session is counseling. I feel like, you know, I mean, this is people's time, you know, but then you're talking about hypnosis. Like what? I don't know where to go. There's so many things I want to ask. I'm not sure to ask what first, except maybe I can ask you what made you interested in all of the, like, where is the pattern? There's the pattern of going from one thing to the next. Like, how do these connect?
Okay. I'm going to freak you out even more.
Yay.
No. Good luck.
Okay. So, so my senior year in high school, I dropped out of band. I've always had a weight problem, and part of that was because I was so anxious as a kid, and I didn't know it. My GI tract problems, IBS, wasn't diagnosed at that time, and so I would overeat because when I would drink, it made me sick. So you know, if you're dehydrated, you're at risk for overeating. So then I would overeat, and then I wasn't processing my food. So I kind of started like the self-loathing really early in life. I was obese from like age 5 on. So when I got into college and my plan didn't work out, I didn't get to do the band thing or whatever. My weight was really high, and I got pregnant and gained 50 pounds. I'm 5'2", and when my son was like over a year or 2 years old, I weighed 225 pounds. My BMI was a 52. Okay. And I was in the worst place I think I could have ever been in my life. It was awful. And I woke up one morning, I was like, I should start meditating. And so the opportunity came around, and I went to India, and I came back just kind of feeling like, okay, I learned how to control some of those oversensitive reactions. Okay, so it gave me a place to land and breathe and learn how to relax to deal with all that anxiety stuff. I lost weight. I got down to 122 pounds.
You lost 100 pounds?
103.
Wow.
And so after that, and so I went into psychology because I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? And then, you know, whenever I dropped a music minor, I liked anthropology. It's that simple. And I was like, well, how did we evolve? Like that, you know, it helps me to understand, like, well, why do these changes happen? Like over 4.6 million years of human evolution. How do we evolve? That helps me understand the big picture, right? I have a degree in psychology. I lose 103 pounds. I'm like, okay, I need to make it to where my life is dependent on me being healthy so I can have a career. And also what just happened to my body. So I got my master's in exercise physiology. And then I started working in the hospital because I wanted to do clinical stuff. But I always knew I was going to be a college professor because I was like the annoying kid. You know, I've always been the little professor where I'd have my special interest and I just talk about it all the time, you know? And so the PhD at Baylor is perfect. Exercise, nutrition, and preventive health. And so I focused there. And then whenever I was doing that, we had to take classes, doctoral electives. So I went to a psychology department to take my electives. And so I took health psychology. So I'm kind of like a full circle of myself. And while I was there, my professor, Dr. Gary Elkins, he has the mind-body medicine lab at Baylor. and he's an internationally renowned expert in clinical hypnosis. So during this whole time, I'd started meditating when I was 20. I'd been to India, I'd gone to school there when I was getting a master's degree. So he was like, hey, you're perfect to come deliver this hypnosis intervention. And during the time that I was getting my master's degree, I started working in a massage therapy program. I started teaching in 2002. So I'm doing massage, exercise, all, trying to apply everything I'm learning, and then work in the hospital. So it just came together really beautifully. And I did, I maintained my weight loss for 9 years. And then I ended up having more kids, and I gained 40 pounds. That seemed to be my magic number. And I get it off and got pregnant again. So I have 20 pounds left, and I'll be back to my healthy weight. But yeah, it's been a trip, man. I do feel sometimes I feel like I've lived lifetimes in terms of my experiences. And throughout all of it, I'm like trying to understand things better. I want to understand things mechanistically, going back to neurodiversity, what is happening in the brain and the nervous system? And then how do I keep playing music? How do I keep my structure good? How do I keep my relaxation sound so that I can continue to benefit and have cognitive reserve? And plus, I want to play Bach. I want them to be able to say, she played Bach.
Yep. But you know what I love about this is that music always has a place, and that you didn't have to give up music. Like, you didn't have to either pursue music or any of these other things, or only one of these things. That you had the opportunity to do all of these things, and you weren't pigeonholed into one thing. Like, so many times in music, I feel like we are pigeonholed into, you have to do this course, or you can do this course, or you're not legit. You're not a real musician, whatever that means. And you're proving otherwise. You are still a musician, and you have all these other things.
Right. And I love hearing because on paper, if you haven't been in any of these areas, what you described as your experiences looked like a scatter shot, on paper. But I'm going, no, I see how that, I see that. And I'm listening to you. I'm like, yeah, I guess there's really only so nerdy you can be about, what it is, like the physical wellness, the mental stuff, and any combination of that. There's only so nerdy you can be before you start going down rabbit holes like what you're describing. Like, you can only go down physical movement for so long before you go, oh, there's a mind aspect in here. Well, how does that play in? Oh, well, what if I looked at this from a structural perspective? Oh, well, what about meditation? How does that, and next thing you know, you're, 3 states over going, these do not look like they connect, but I swear they do. And bear with me.
Yep.
So I love hearing that from somebody who's on the science end of it, if that makes sense, professionally.
Yeah, my mother plays piano, and I just, when I had to walk away from music, I held on to all my music. I saw my beginner flute. I have my beginner flute books. I have my intermediate flute. I have every piece of music I ever played in high school band, which is funny because when the first time I played here with our concert band, we had to turn in our music, and I've never done that before. I was like, oh, and I was written all over it and stuff, and I was like, oh, maybe I need to learn some new etiquette. It's been a while, I stopped playing in 1997, and I played again in 2018. That was my break. And but I'd held on to every piece of music because I knew, I was like, this is so important that you can't walk away, but I needed to have a full-time job. So the postdoc that I did, that hypnosis delivery, when I had my second child, I walked away. I quit because my anxiety was over the top, and I had undiagnosed fibromyalgia at that point, and I wasn't in a good place, and my husband supported me, and I was able to just take the time with the baby that I needed. And then I just did adjunct work for like 9 years, and because getting a full-time job in academia is hard. And so once I got that job, it was just like on board. I was like immediately, and I believe in music and what it can do for us. Again, music is just as important as exercise and nutrition and our health. And maybe even, what you were saying just then made me think, how it all comes together. I believe, we evolved to the sound. We evolved to recognize these sounds and respond to music. It's such a big part of who we are. It's our evolutionary birthright, is what I feel. And I knew it had to come back to it. Whether or not I can get past page 2 on the Vox Partita, we'll figure out. But I'll at least keep trying.
Bach is a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah.
Especially in your situation, I don't know how you get past the first line. There's just so much.
But it's so, in the partita in particular, the fact that it's all 16th notes, and then that I can just, you can add the musicality later, but the fact that it is that, it's so refreshing to me, and it's so comforting.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask, when it comes to sight reading, okay, that answers that. Enough said. Because when I love sight reading, but I love the challenge of something new. I love the new things, but it's based on patterns. So I'm looking for patterns as I go, and I just base off, this is this. And if I played a wrong note, it's like, it was close enough. Maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong. I don't know. I'm sight reading, but this looks like an arpeggio, so I'm just going to play that arpeggio, et cetera, et cetera. But is it for you that it's got to be a specific pattern and you've got to get it a certain way, or how does that go for you?
Well, I played, 6 years and a 25-year break, and now I'm back at 2 years. I'm 3 years in now. So I feel like in high school, when I was young, it was a suffer fest for sure. I mean, we had to do sight singing and music theory, and I broke down and cried. Oh, and that's another thing. When you do lose a little control and get destabilized, it's humiliating. It is humiliating. And it was a big part of me just kind of walking away. But it was hard. I would just crush. It would crush me. I would just lose it, But I think I recognize now that's because you need more practice. That's where the etudes come in. That's where just doing daily practice and reading things comes in, because that helps you recognize those patterns when you are in those high stress situations. I am getting better. I've had to sight read some band music where I've shown up and missed a rehearsal and played it off the cuff. And that's another thing. If I have the support of the room and my section, it is better. I don't like to be by myself necessarily. I think being overexposed is not where my lane is. I like to be like in an ensemble. That's why I like orchestra, can be way back, But going back to anxiety is when you can't anticipate something. I mean, sight reading is nothing but here's a surprise. And if you don't know where to find those anchors, it's going to be more destabilizing.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wonder why I like it so much. Maybe I don't mind destabilization.
You're not.
It's my favorite thing. I'd sight read all day, every day if I could, and never work on another thing and just sight read. Oh, I love it. It's my favorite. It's like, ooh, how fast can I take it? Yeah, I'm gonna screw it up. I don't care. How fast can I go? I mean, it's goofy, but it's like when I leave my flute up to practice, that's what I do. Is I turn to something I've not seen before. I'm like, what does this sound like? I don't know. That's how I start my practice sessions, and sometimes that's all my practice sessions are. But I mean, it's a completely different situation. It's interesting how the brain works that way.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how that goes with your knowledge of psychology. I mean, I've always been a person that really loves new experiences and the creativity that goes with that, and seeing the opportunities in the new experiences. Even if the new experiences are crappy, there's a new opportunity there, and just new. But I still like, it doesn't mean like that I don't cherish things that are old, but I like the new things. I don't know.
One of the conversations lately, that's becoming more mainstream, is looking at some of these traits as evolutionary selections. So, anxiety is an adaptation that's helped us survive. And COVID's a good example of that, right? So if you have someone who's really anxious, then they probably have less exposure, right? But being really brave and exploring is an evolutionary selection too, because we're not going to evolve without both, right? And so I think that's part of it too. Is great. You got that freedom of movement and being brave and exploring and pushing boundaries. That's also how we get to the future. So it's like this balance point, of then also being cautious. And I think most people kind of are in the middle. You can just kind of teeter with those things,
Makes sense.
And also, I think that, I don't know, if we go into different fields, we go into the fields we're good at, right? So like for me, physiologically, I'm like that. I was like exploring, go find all the things. And whereas when I get my flute, I'm just like, I have to have instruction. I have to ask my teacher, like, where do I start? What should I do? What am I listening to? What are overtones? Again, back to the overtones. I need a physicist to explain that to me.
I don't understand why physics is not part of a required music degree. Like I had to take some college, like at my undergrad, you had to take a college course in science. Physics was not offered. It was either geology, I'm like, what do rocks have to do with music? Or biology, I'm like, didn't I have this in college? Or chemistry, I'm like, absolutely not. None of this has to do with what I'm studying. Why couldn't we take anatomy or physics? Both were off limits.
Interesting.
Those are actually helpful.
Those are the two most relevant, I would say.
Relevant, yeah. I don't know. I had to beg to take an anatomy class and I was going to take it over the summer. It was only offered to nursing majors. I'm like, well, screw that. I'm interested in this. And they're like, well, that's too bad. I'm like, hello? Yeah. And then I finally got them to let me take it. And then I decided not to study over the summer because I didn't want to. I was going to be gone. So then I had to take friggin' biology. It was the dumbest waste of 2 semesters in my life. I'm like, I could be learning something useful. I mean, it was like not mitochondria, but biology. I don't remember what we studied. I honestly have no idea what I was supposed to learn. Same with math. Like, why? That's a whole other rabbit hole. But physics would have been so helpful. I teach physics all the time to my students, and I've never even had physics. But we talk about volume of airspeed and, velocity and pressure, and that would have been super helpful.
Yeah. And I guess there are some schools that have like upper level, like acoustics, physics type stuff, but it seems like they're like grad school level things. Because in the Flint Forum, every now and then people will pipe in that are physicists and they can talk about some of that acoustic stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's great. It would be great if there was like, stuff that was more aimed towards new musicians, or even like a continuing ed type thing. That would be fun.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, because Arizona State, where I got my undergrad, they had an acoustic class. And I would have taken it, but I had a class conflict I could not get out of. There's only one course. I'm like, I cannot solve this problem. Right? Because there was only one course. And then, by the time I got to my master's degree, or maybe it was the other way around, one or the other, it was my course load was too full and I couldn't take any more classes for one of them, and certainly not a non-required class, or there was a class conflict. Like I was there for 7 years and I couldn't make that work.
I bet you could have dropped a theory class, just one semester. I mean,
I'd have been okay
too much darn theory, and I'm just going to stand by that.
Would have been okay with that.
We had an acoustics of music class. It was a physics class. My brother got to take it. He was a business major. I didn't get to take that, but I didn't know about it until after I'd already taken the dumb biology class. I didn't even know it was offered. It was like shoved off in some elective whatnot. I'm like, oh, that could have been my science class. Where are my advisors in this? What is going on? I mean, honestly, I think we probably should have taken some of those core classes out, and we could have replaced them not just with business stuff, but psychology would be helpful. Because
Yeah.
especially as a teacher, you need to understand your students. You need to understand your audience. You need to understand your colleagues. Business etiquette. I took a business etiquette class for fun. Oh my gosh, I use that stuff every day. Why is that not a thing, you know?
Well, and I know that music ed majors have to take developmental psychology because they're going to need it. That's fair. They absolutely should. I would have loved that too. But instead, I was forced to take 2 years of class piano because, and I quote, you're going to need to accompany your students when you teach privately. I've never had to do that. B, you just said I'm going to have to teach privately. I'm going to teach as a performance. I'm going to teach as a performance major. Doesn't that mean I should have developmental psychology because I'm going to be working with kids?
Yeah.
That's my thought on the subject. That's just put that out there. Sorry, we went on a tangent there.
No, I think it's really, one of these days we're gonna sit here and we're gonna develop our own music ed course or music performance course for music majors, and somebody is gonna latch onto it and go, I like this. Let's put this at our school. We keep talking about this, I know.
It does keep coming up.
I don't understand why we had to have these core classes in undergraduate degree, like American history and English. And like, didn't I just spend all of my high school doing this? I'm in school for music. Like, oh, well, you only do music when you get to your master's. Like, what? Why? But that still doesn't make sense to me. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but it's like, I felt like it was a waste of time. I could have been practicing. I could have been learning something else. All of those classes. I don't know. I don't know if you had that same situation, Jackie, but that drove me crazy.
One thing that was a little different in Alabama, I'm thankful for, they weren't real, we had to take 3 histories or whatever, but we got to choose them as long as they progressed in difficulty. And I'm really thankful because like you said, I was already in high school. I'd already taken, Alabama history forever and US government and stuff. And then I got there, so I was able to say like world history. It's like, I want to know about the world. And then I expanded into Asian history because even then I was really interested in Asia. And that really helped set the stage for me, going to India a few years later and knowing more about it. And then I took, advanced Japanese civilization, and then I took all Asian philosophy classes. So I felt like I had more control in choosing the curriculum. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, if students could have more input. Yeah. But all that stuff goes into budgets and how big schools are and how many professors you have and what they're qualified to teach. And there's lots of wheels turning. Yeah. A lot of connecting parts and stuff. So I don't think you saw that today.
No, I don't think, I don't think we're suggesting that it should be solved overnight either, just to clarify, because we do talk about this a lot, but obviously there's logistics.
It's not as easy as just revamping a degree and be like, oh, we're just going to get rid of all that.
But there was a degree, I forget which school it was. There was at one point, I don't want to say it was Harvard, where like the students could pick their classes and do their own curriculum as long as it had like this pattern and where that they are taking what they're interested in to kind of put them in that towards their career goals. And then that kind of went away. And I was like, well, that was actually kind of cool, empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of brings us full circle, right? Is right. A lot of what I'm talking about in terms of neurodiversity, like recognizing diversity is like when you recognize you can empower and you have empowerment, you can continue. Because it's just too hard if you feel like your power is being taken away, it's just a burden. And it's more effort to get to lessons. It's more effort to practice, and those things. So let people choose.
Yeah, because taking that away from them is a good way to push them out altogether.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that. Nobody really wants that. Like nobody ever said, you know what? Let's drive people away from music.
Or I guess there's different tracks, but even like with students recognize, okay, well, do you want to go professional or do you want to just be able to keep playing and, playing and just in your community with different low stress groups or, what do you want to do with this? Or you want to just play scales for the rest of your life every day because it feels good,
Yeah.
And then recognizing that with the students, say, oh, our goals are different here, but as long as they keep playing. And but, and then I know you guys know this. I mean, and I know you guys have get hard time being motivated too. I know for me recently, it's like I had a big hump I had to get through before I got back to being like, okay, I feel more motivated now, and I want to embrace daily practice as opposed to being too overstimulated to where adding practice was too much. Sometimes I feel like I'm just practicing so I can manage rehearsal as opposed to practicing so that I'm progressing musically.
Right.
Yeah, that I think happens actually at all levels.
Right.
That happens at all levels. It certainly happened to me. I'm just going to survive this week. I don't care if I get any better.
Yep. Practicing for rehearsal is a very good way to put that.
Yeah. And then, but for someone who's not neurotypical, right? So one of the things that was hard for me, like if you're not neurotypical, it means you're not thinking about the things the way other people think about. And sometimes, like if you're having a conversation and you offer like a different perspective on it, I found like a lot of times people would think I was arguing with them as opposed to just offering a different perspective. And that'll shut you down quicker than anything. And I noticed that for me that I started like the selective mutism where I would just stop talking. I just stop talking. And so if you have students who are having to navigate that too, then they may not be able to know how to tell you, oh, I'm having a bad week, or I didn't practice, the week was tough, or they may not be able to know how to articulate it. So I think that kind of comes back to like having a safe place where you can just be like, hey, you know.
Yeah.
I told I had a A2 that I was working on. I had a bad week, and I told her, I was like, I didn't practice. Sat down, I didn't practice. She goes, well, fine, we'll do it again next week. And I love that. It's like, we'll just keep doing it. You have the same attitude. It's just assigned until you get it. And so that works for me. But yeah, you know, that's another recommendation from Harvard. And their blurb was kind of like on a neurodiversity for the work environment, how to make it good, accommodating. The other one was just be patient.
Yeah. And that's something that we've lost culturally too. And I think it's good that you're mentioning that issue in this light too. Because I mean, it's hard enough when I've got friends on all sorts of viewpoints. It's like I'm not quiet about this, you know. I don't care. Are you a good person? Do you care about me? Do you care about the people that I care about? Fine, as long as you're not malicious. Okay, explain to me why you think that way. Does it make sense? Yes. Do you hate me if I disagree? No, we're gonna be friends. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But that inability to voice a different opinion, I mean, it's really become an issue lately. I see with a lot of people where, well, we're just going to shut down. We're not going to talk, whether or not you should, or, you know, have the ability. You know, I've been around some argumentative people too who don't mind arguing. But when you're talking about, forgive me for the language, I'm still learning it, neurodivergent people. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like that brings in a whole new light. Like, okay, if you can't handle hearing another opinion, not only is that a problem socially, but you're also putting people that you should care about at risk for, you know, worsening the problem that they're dealing with. We don't need to do that. It's fine to listen and go, okay, why do you think that way? Like, you know. Well,
and then also, like, if a student doesn't understand, that's not a reflection on you as a teacher. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's another thing too, where they'll, like, you know, there's for some people it's a tendency to take that personal, like that, you know, that they're doing something wrong. That's why they don't understand. But that's not it. I mean, you might just not understand because you're different in how you think about things. One thing in the music community, I bring this up, the colors thing, man. Like,
tone colors.
Oh man, you know, it's used in the language a lot, and it's interesting. A lot of people will say they have no idea what that means, you know. And for me, I have no idea what that means. There is nothing I can connect to. So I need it to be like, well, not speaking in metaphors, I guess is the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so what do we mean by color? And so then I'm like, wait a second, are we talking about overtones? Okay, like, we're talking darker, we're talking richer, and all of these variables. But then when you start throwing color, I have no idea what we're talking about.
I don't get the colors thing either. I feel you.
And
Make
so
it light blue. What does that mean?
Yeah, so if you're already like real literal on things and then metaphors are thrown in, then you're not communicating either. But if that comes naturally to you and you're trying to share it, then both people are frustrated.
That's true.
Well, and that's back on the teacher though. Like if you're going to teach, you need to be prepared to communicate with your students, hear them out, and vary your teaching style. Because like we were talking about with the student that I worked with before, who it's like, no, I need to tell you what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it functions, and if I'm being literal or descriptive. That's my checklist for working with that student. I'll say, okay, you need to get, crescendo here, and you're going to get to this loud, and you're going to, like, in detail, here's how we're going to shape the phrase. Then I work with another student, and I'm like, okay, come up with a story.
Yeah.
For this etude, what's happening in the story? Like, is it a trapeze artist? Is it a squirrel? Those are two different students. They both understand what I'm talking about.
Right.
But I cannot ask the student who needs details to play a squirrel. And if I start getting too nitty gritty with the one that I can say, okay, play a squirrel. Oh, that student is going to be so lost and it's too much. And then they get overwhelmed and they get anxious and they start messing up. But that's on me as a teacher. That's nothing to do with like reflecting on them as students. So we're really getting back into, it's really on the teacher to be able to listen and adapt.
And learn how their students learn. Not everybody's the same. And that's okay. And not everybody's going to understand how to teach.
It's fun to figure that out.
I think so.
I
think so. I want to bring this back to real quick, like as a final thing. You mentioned about hypnosis, and I know that's probably in people's brains. What can you tell us about what you learned, why you picked it, and what? Because when we hear hypnosis, we think of the guy who's like, "Look, I'm going to put a sock on your shoulder, and you're going to talk to it like it's a bird." All these things, and we're like. And it's like, some people squawk like a chicken. Like, how does all this work? And how does this apply to what you've been doing?
It's so funny. One of the jokes, in clinical hypnosis is, well, yeah, you can take anybody, college student, stick them on a stage and tell them to squawk like a chicken. They'll just do it, So clinical hypnosis, okay. Hypnotizability is a trait, just like IQ is a trait. So IQ is a trait. And, even though someone has a certain IQ, you can study really hard and do well. So we can still learn things, even though IQ is a trait. So hypnotizability is also a trait. Some individuals are not as hypnotizable, and then some individuals are highly hypnotizable. About 10% of the population are so highly hypnotizable, you can give surgery without anesthesia. That's how hypnotizable they are. And I've seen videos of a woman having a C-section under hypnosis. So there are individuals who have that ability. Now, some of the original work, with hypnotizability, scientists went to India and they were with talking to yogis. And some of the yogis, they were able to show their hands and say, look, I can make one hand hot and one hand cold. And then they would measure it, and they could. And what they came back and found is most people can do that. So you can do that. You can have then a conscious effect on some of these processes that we don't normally think that we're in control of. Okay. So the way hypnotizability works, we think, right? So the mechanism's not totally understood. Is it mitigates, it puts a barrier in the axis that goes from your hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal gland. Okay, so say if someone's having a symptom, so clinical hypnosis is direct. We are treating something. And so we're like hot flashes. When women go through menopause, their symptoms are symptoms of estrogen withdrawal. So your female body's been depending on estrogen to maintain body temperature. to maintain bone density and all of these other systems of the body. So when estrogen goes down, you can't maintain body temperature as much. There's sleep irregularities. There's like all these symptoms that for some women are not easy to manage. So that was the goal of the hypnosis treatment that I delivered. There's other things that they deliver hypnosis to as well, like IBS, etc. So what you do, so you get a participant. We just start out, we don't measure hypnotizability. We're just, it's almost like progressive muscle relaxation a little bit, where we get a person to like, focus on something. One difference is we'll say, okay, what is our goal? So if it's like hot flashes, for example, it's like, okay, we need to lower body temperature. And so I would get a participant, they would focus on something, and I'd be like, we're going to count to 5. And I'll start at the head, and we'd go all the way down, and it was relaxing, or listen to my voice. And then we would ask them to choose what visual that they could think of that helped them cool their body. So some women would say, I'm gonna imagine walking on a beach with a cool breeze, or standing in front of a refrigerator or something. When you get them all the way relaxed, I can hear a difference in their breathing rate. I could tell when a person would get to like what we call hypnotic state. And then we would walk through those visuals that they had. And then once you go through the visualization, you're walking through the beach, the wind is cool. Then we say, so then you would give what we call a hypnotic suggestion. And they're in control of that too. So the suggestion is, okay, so when you feel a hot flash coming, for example, you will be able to re-experience this coolness. And then after the suggestion, be like, okay, when we come out of hypnosis, you're going to be refreshed, and you're going to feel good and alert. And, you end with this alertness. And then it would be like, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're alert. And they'll pop their eyes open. Now, again, it's a trade. So that's the first session. And then they would be given like something to listen to, where they would practice to learn self-hypnosis. So clinical hypnosis, the goal is always to teach them how to do self-hypnosis. So by the third session, I would say, okay, I'm going to teach you how to get into hypnotic state in less than 3 minutes. And so that way, as soon as a symptom comes, you can put yourself in hypnotic state and not have the hypothalamus and the pituitary system hit your adrenal gland so you have a symptom, so you flash. So it's a way to intervene to stop the signal. And then Elkins has a hypnotizability scale, so they can actually measure hypnotizability to see how the intervention worked with that. I'm not familiar with all the results on that now. But I will say I've had my babies without drugs, because I am able to get myself that separated from the symptoms that I'm having. That help? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's a powerful effect. And there's people walking around and they have the ability and they don't know that they're able to intervene that way. And we try some of that with, just relaxation exercises. Oh, and okay, so hypnotizability. This is the thing I wanted to remember. So right now, what you're aware of, your conscious awareness, is a teeny tiny bit of what your brain's doing. Most everything is being dealt with subconsciously, okay? So the problem with like stress and anxiety and hot flashes and all these things is you don't feel like you have conscious control. Going back to anxiety, you can't predict it because you don't have conscious control, okay? But all of us go through hypnotic states. So like if you're always drive the same route, for example, if you ever driven somewhere and you don't remember how you got there, you just got in your car and the next time, then you were just there, that's hypnotic state. So basically what you're doing is you're letting the subconscious take over, because your subconscious knows how to get there. So what clinical hypnosis does then is it instructs your subconscious on how to take over the symptoms that you're having, because you can't consciously control it.
Can anybody do that, or only people who are hypnotizable, I should say?
Okay, well, only people can deliver hypnosis who have been qualified to do so. So like me, for example, I was able to deliver that intervention under the guidance of Dr. Elkins, and I'm not able to give that intervention without like his permission and oversight. So I'll because I'm not a psychologist, okay, but I got that training.
Oh, I think I mean that backwards. Like,
Yeah.
can anybody be hypnotized, or only certain people?
But so the person delivering it, I guess it matters. But anyone can be hypnotized. Anyone, yeah. So again, it's a trait. So 10% of people are highly hypnotizable. I don't know the percentage of people who are not very hypnotizable, but most everyone is hypnotizable to some extent. So the intervention that we did for the treatment of hot flashes, we had a 74% reduction in hot flashes just with hypnosis, which is better than medication. Now, can you go have a baby without drugs being hypnotized? Well, that would vary, with hypnotizability maybe, and then other techniques too. Mm-hmm. But would have a surgery just under hypnosis? I would certainly want to make sure that person was capable. Yeah. But I do think it's beneficial even with stress reduction, with musicianship, because of the stress, performance-related anxiety, right, is different than just general anxiety. And I mean, a lot of musicians certainly experience that. So if you could teach a musician, self-hypnosis before a performance or something, just like, we were able to lower hot flashes, we certainly could hopefully help that musician too before a performance. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly. I mean, it's not something that you hear people talk about very often. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like the stage hypnotist, phenomenon happened, and then still in general culture, you'll see it on TV where they're using it manipulative and the eyes and all the fun visuals, but that's not what it's like at all. If you sat down, if you'd ever done progressive muscle relaxation, you kind of recognize we're really getting into that learning how to relax the body to get the brain out of the way. Mm-hmm. Like my band director, stop overthinking. Even with musicians, okay, and the musicians probably experience some of this like the flow state.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and most of us have done, like, I know we're talking about, we don't really hear the word hypnosis often. I agree with that for sure. But you're talking about progressive muscle relaxation. I've done that in yoga classes. I mean, intro once, and then what you were describing made me think about, I've been in various clinics where we've done, guided chakra work, stuff like that, where it's like, when we start giving it these different names, more musicians are going to be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But it's definitely interesting to hear it from a clinical perspective. Like, it definitely takes. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, even like the chakra system, I am familiar with Eastern medicine and all of those things. And it's like, well, even that and the meridians and Chinese medicine, we're looking at the nervous system and the endocrine system.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet in music, we tend to more talk about it in those terms than think of like clinical hypnosis. It sounds like, people go to that stage performance. It's like, no. We've all done this. Almost all of us have done this to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. So most people have experienced it in some way. And it's important medicine. So, because like with menopausal symptoms, some of those medications increase the risk for breast cancer, heart attack, strokes. And so if we can do something else that minimizes side effects, that's good. It's medicine, Yeah. But I think music is medicine for the mind, So music is medicine. So if there's barriers to being able to take that medicine, how do we remove that?
Yeah. Yep.
How would you go about finding somebody if you were interested in pursuing some clinical hypnotization, maybe for performance anxiety or anything else? How would you go about finding somebody who would be qualified?
Well, it would need to be a clinical psychologist,
okay.
most likely, like I said, I would not deliver hypnosis without permission, because I don't have that scope of practice. So I would definitely look that up to make sure that they were clinical, and that that was the background. And there's an international journal of hypnosis, and I don't know if they have resources in there, but it is possible. So for Baylor, for example, the PsyD, we have a PsyD program, a doctorate in psychology, and those students, and it's a clinical doctorate, so they have the opportunity to get that training. So there's probably other students around the world, around the country and stuff, or other professionals that have that training too. But I would just have to Google it. That's my short answer. I can just Google probably.
That works just fine. Well, I know you've got to run, so we don't want to hold you too much longer. But if anybody has any questions for you, where can people find more about you and what you do? And, if you want them to find you, I should say.
Oh gosh, it's so funny. Yeah, so I'm kind of like I'm like somewhat introverted, which is the funny thing too. Well, the performance health Facebook page is good. I mean, I don't have a website or anything, I have a fountain pen Instagram, like that is like my thing. I have like that, and a couple pictures of my flute are on there. But yeah, my email is at where I work is jdove@mcclenan.edu. So that would be fine. Somebody sent me an email, questions there. I'd be happy to talk. And I hope that, and one thing I'll make clear too, I hope I didn't say anything that was hurtful to anyone. That comes to the point of like feeling like you might be misunderstood sometimes. But I certainly, my experiences don't represent everybody's experiences. They're my journey and what I observed and what I found, and so I'm not representing everyone. It's just me. But I would be happy to answer any questions. But I don't have a website or anything. I'm sorry. If you want to see my fountain pens, they're at Dr. Dove on Instagram. So Dr.Dove is my fountain pen Instagram. You can catch me there too. Check out some pens. They're really good for sustainability. Pens over here.
No worries. We'll tag you and all that in the show notes. And
yeah.
Thank you for an amazing conversation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel honored that you asked me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So thanks for coming. And guys, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And also please leave us a review. If what Dr. Dove said was particularly, it just hit you a certain way, please leave us a review. We'd appreciate that. It helps us get in front of more musicians. So Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Tuned and Strong podcast.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey musicians, did you know that up to 90% of musicians will experience playing-related pain or injury over the course of their career? How many hushed conversations have you heard about a lingering, quote, shoulder pain or a weird tingling in your fingers? Or maybe low back pain or a crampy weakness, or maybe you or your colleague just says, I just have to get through the gig. And you watch them pop Advil like candy, maybe flush it down with whiskey. How many times have we seen something like this? So many, right? Well, it's time we start talking about our struggles, our pain, our frustrations in a private space where we don't just complain and mobilize and blindly stretch, but we learn how to strengthen our muscles, our career successes, and build each other up. I've got a brand new program that combines all of these things, and I want you to be a part of it. It's a community, not a workout. It's a community with group coaching and great content that in 12 weeks will have you understanding more about your body, what you need, and how you work so you can avoid that career-threatening injury. The 3 things that musicians don't want. We don't want to be injured. We don't want to have a lack of stamina. And we don't want to be clueless. AKA, when you hurt, who do you go see? Just a, quote, doctor? Well, this program addresses all of those things. You're going to walk away with an immense knowledge of who to see. You're going to be empowered because you're going to know what to do should you ever get injured, or should you have a colleague that gets injured. You will be able to actually offer appropriate advice. You're also going to learn about the body and the anatomy as it relates to playing your instrument and your own anatomy. And then you're going to learn how to build not just your strength and endurance, but you're going to learn how to design your own corrective exercise program. So I hope you will join me in this new program. It's called the Music Strong Pilot Program, Job Security for Musicians.